GDLS Canada, an industry leader dedicated to supporting our customers and the community.
In part 1, we learned how Canada assembled a national team through the efforts of a few intrepid visionaries. Getting to Nottingham, England was one thing. Performing well enough to leave a legacy for growth in women's lacrosse was another.
It must have been incredible to start the first game. And who did you play first? I don't really...
Wales.
Wales. So Wales was a little bit
And we
behind.
had one fan. We had one fan in the stands, and there was a lot of people in the stands for the opening series of games. A lot of people. Good turnout. And who was the one fan?
My mother. And my my uncle and my aunt, they lived in England.
Okay.
They'd come out.
So they were cheering for Canada.
In the box seats.
Yeah. Yes. Except for my uncle was Welsh.
Oh, that would have been tough.
And we played Wales. And I remember we paraded onto the field and we're standing facing each other and we exchanged gifts. And we got these Native American little soap carving things. And I remember, I really like this. I don't want to give this away. Well, we ended up getting one. But then when they sang the national anthem, I happened to look up in the stands and my uncle wasn't standing. And I went to him afterwards. He's a comical guy. He goes, I wasn't going to stand for the Canadian national anthem, but I stood up for the Welsh national anthem. It's like, okay.
So we had one fan, and there was probably at least 1,000 people up there, for sure.
Wow.
You've never seen numbers like that.
Right.
So what happened that day?
Well, I'll let Julie has a good memory of the beginning of the game. I have a really good memory of the end of the game.
Well, the beginning, I remember standing in net going, what the hell am I doing here? You know, and I'm just going, oh my goodness, you know, how these players, and I'd only been playing net for like 3 months.
Yeah.
I think the first goal, 3 goals went in, and then I sort of said to myself, smarten up here, and talked to myself, and then I think they only got 3 other goals for the rest of the game.
Wow. You had to settle down.
Yes.
Yeah, you had to settle down.
Yeah, so we got behind early, which, you know, was maybe not unexpected for everybody else, but, you know, affected the confidence. But as the game pulled along, we had a good clear. We were able to get the ball up the field, and with about 5 minutes to go, Gail, who was, of course, at that time 15 years old, she turned 16 during the tournament, put us ahead 7-6 with about 5 minutes to go. Mm-hmm. So she just roared down the field, scored. Now we're happy, but nervous. And come the last couple of minutes, I'm not sure if Courtney remembers this, I'm on the sideline with Courtney. At that point, we could only have one assistant coach on the sideline, and one had to be in the stands. So Dave was in the stands for that game. We alternated. So I yell out to Carrie, hold the ball. Remember, there's no shot clock.
And that's very much a box thing.
Yeah.
Hold the ball.
Hold the ball. Well, the whistles started to rain down. 1,000 people in the stands, they want action, we want to win, right? So we held the ball and we won 7-6.
Yeah.
And that was pretty interesting at the little post-beer gathering.
Yeah. And one of the other coaching specific things that these guys were so great at was trying to open the field, because beginning the game of lacrosse for women, no boundaries. You know, your grandparents sitting in a chair might be a boundary.
Right.
But working with these young superstars to pull and open up the field and then feed it to the outside really was a strategy that we all tried to spread them out, and you know, not like a scrum.
Right.
You know, and these young women would do a great job because of their accuracy with their passing. And I think it was one of the things that turning points on the game, so many of them were bilateral. They could be ambidextrous, and because they learned it in box. And that would, from my friends who coached the other teams, would say, wow, the stick work is just incredible.
That was an asset for Canada.
Very much an asset.
Yeah, and using, of course, coming from a box world where everything is compressed, as Courtney said, to say, hey, we got good speed. Janice Holt from BC was like she could run like lightning, as could a Gail at that age. She was just, and Michelle was, Boyer could run all day, and as could Barb. So we knew we had people who could really move. So we just had to say, get them the ball, get the ball down, and hopefully get it to Carrie. Because if Carrie had the ball, then everybody relaxed. Because nobody could get it off her. So, and we knew she was the best finisher in the tournament as far as I'm concerned. But she was, so that was the base strategy. So it wasn't too complicated, which helped us because, as Marie said, we'd only been together for a week.
So the defense becomes very important. Your goalie, as you know, we mentioned before, like every team that has success, usually the goalie is one of the key components of a successful team. And so Marie, you and Julie, you played defense, right? And Julie, you were the goalie, and then who else was part of your kind of contingent that were defensive minded?
Carp, Noreen Lem played back with
Noreen
us.
Lem, yeah.
And
Janice Malcolm.
Janice.
Oh, Janice.
And then Janice Malcolm was what was called the third man, third man, even though it was a women's game. And because they took the terminology from, the old 1800s. And then the two defensive wings were Barb Boyes and Michelle Boyer. And then our center was Carol Taylor. Carol Taylor. And effectively, they were the only people who played when the other team had the ball. They were the only ones coming in to the defensive zone. All of the attackers stayed up, and the attack wings would cheat maybe onto the other side of center, but would not come in.
So it kind of felt familiar from a box perspective, because that's who we had back there.
Yeah, you were always looking for familiarity in some way, shape, or form, right? So.
And we'd grown up in box playing zones. Right? That's what
And typically the coaching strategy of the game at the day was person on person, man on man, woman on woman. And then initially the insight from Dave and Paul, what they would bring, the concept of boxing it out, zoning it out so that we would have space as opposed to person, or closing somebody down, obviously, was a great strategy. But because the young women at the time had such sense of the game, they would play it beautifully. And the ability to intercept, one of my favorite would be when you'd pick off a ball and then you'd come out and pick off the ball. It was just so, I get goosebumps thinking about it. It was really fun.
Good anticipation.
Anticipation.
And so did you start any fast breaks that day, Julie, with hitting the middies deep?
I don't remember, besides the
It's a long
opening,
time
I
ago.
don't remember much.
Yeah.
But that did become important later on.
Very
Right, and I
definitely.
think all of this is sort of, and you're familiar with this, Jim, because for the Canadian women, we had no difficulty in the attack end of the field.
Right.
We were strong in the midfield. The challenge was for our women, similar to the men with the long sticks, is to understand the nuances of the defensive end of game. And that's when Dave and I and Courtney said, we're playing at a world level. We can't afford to be getting fouls all the time. Let's try and work a zone. Everybody's comfortable
So the
with the
zone
zone.
was a big move for
We
you.
fell into
Yes.
a zone.
And they weren't used to playing against a zone, so
Right.
it kind of gave us
It was
a
the right
big
thing to do.
advantage.
It was
Right.
definitely a good strategy at the
And I
time.
think too, back then, defensively, because I played cover point for the first 2 or 3 years, first we were afraid of checking people.
Right.
But back then, defense, you couldn't really do anything. Now they have this this is my area, I can hold my stick there.
Right.
And almost, well, not a cross check, but if they run into it, that's their fault. But back in '82, you didn't have that. So defense was totally like, what can I do? I can't do anything.
You had to-
The only thing to do was to check away from the face.
Right.
Okay,
Outside the bubble.
outside the bubble, and that, when you're going all out, that's a tough defensive action.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And you need years of practice to do that accurately, safely.
to hit the ball,
get
right.
And
Right.
not get,
whistled, right.
not get a foul called against you. So anyway, it worked for us,
Yeah.
for sure.
So you beat Wales, you created a lot of unhappy people because you held the ball, but you won. Who did you play in the second game?
Scotland got whooped 10-3.
You call
And
that
bas-
what? That's not a whooping.
Well,
but it's- Yeah.
we were expecting more, but they just took off in the midfield and went odd to net, and poor Julie and the defenders.
So they outbroke you.
Right. We couldn't get back and set the zone up fast enough because we were trying to hang with them.
Okay.
On the one-on-one basis.
Yeah,
And Fiona Sterling was amazing. They had one player that got
4 or 5 goals.
What was it?
5
What was
goals.
her name?
Fiona Sterling.
Fiona Sterling.
Yeah.
Fiona.
Yeah. She was amazing.
Okay, and she was an amazing player.
But the next games we're talking about, because then we came up against England,
Yeah,
who were pre-tournament favorites,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, it was
With Cecile.
Cecilia Breckenridge. who was
Who
the captain.
had wrote
book,
all
I
the
bought her
books
book.
on lacrosse.
Yeah, she's.
She was the lacrosse of the European experience.
Yeah.
She was older too.
She was
And
like
she
the
was
Gordie
older.
Howe. She was like the Gordie Howe of women's lacrosse.
Well respected.
Oh yeah.
And she would come over. There were many people or science graduates who worked in summer camps from Maine to Poconos in Philadelphia. And sometimes these young players would come over, and my parents and my parents' friends would put them up for the week. They were coaching field hockey and lacrosse at these summer camps.
Was that Bears?
Mearstead field hockey and lacrosse. And anyone who loved the game typically went to these camps all over New England and Philadelphia. And then once one graduated, one was on staff and would coach and teach, and
Great
of
technical-
course
great
in the
tech-
evening have the theater, which is when I really realized how much I loved. And to this day, Jane would have a hat, and Feffy would have a hat, and I'd have a hat, and we'd do some silly something or another for the young people. It was good.
Those were important camps because they introduced other countries to technical to U.S. coaches, like England was.
And lifelong friends. Lifelong friends I have made as a result of this sport.
Yeah, very
And
important.
continue.
Very important camps. Yeah.
Yep.
So so then we have England.
Right. So our third game's against England.
Okay.
We're 1-1.
Yeah.
We're doing okay, but England's, it's like we're on top of the heap. Now they had come out of the gate not playing as well as they expected. Anyway, we go up against England, and they had actually done their homework and scouted us. So they put their best defender, an all-world defender, Karen Pottinger, on Carrie, literally. Like she had her stick. Let me just do a demonstration carefully. She had her stick right there, beside,
10 inches from her head.
walked around with, to try and intimidate her, I think, but also to stay tight with her. Well, you don't intimidate Carrie
I
Harvey.
was gonna say, like, I can't see Carrie.
Carrie didn't bat an eye.
No.
We got her the ball, scored 3 goals, and we win 7-5. Yes.
That must have been what happened. You're playing in England.
I think we got people's attention at that point.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think we did something, and maybe you guys can help me remember this, but it was not popular to put black lines under one's
We did that
face.
only at the last game though, didn't we?
No, I think it was. I think we did it. Yeah,
Yeah, we
and
might
it
have.
was
Yeah,
a cork
we did.
bottle, like from a bottle of wine or champagne, and then you heat it up. And I vividly remember our team; these kids would just like put this and it was not that it was intimidating, but it had not been done before. We all know the football players and the Tom Brady's of the world
Yeah, the
do it all
Americans
the
would
time.
know what it was, but I don't think the British teams
They
would know
did.
what it
But we were saying it was supposed to cut down the sun in your eye.
Right, and the reflections.
Yeah, that's what it was
theoretically.
supposed to do.
Yeah, but I'll never forget that. And Muff, I mean, just Muff, I like this look.
And the other thing is we had a reputation, right? Because we were box players.
Yeah.
And the girls would talk, like after the games, you'd chat with the girls from the other team, and they knew we were box players, and they knew that we hit. Like that's what we did. So this whole thing added to the mystique of, I'm kind of afraid of you.
Yeah.
Which didn't hurt us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a ritual.
So you beat England. That was a shock, I'm sure, over there.
Right. And
They
here,
got pressed
and
back
here
here.
comes Marshall Spence again. Doesn't he find a way to get a hold of me and say, hey, you guys are in the hunt to get to the final championship? Because we were, because of the way the teams were playing. Australia was basically beating everybody, right? And if somehow we had beaten Australia or the U.S., mostly the U.S. on the Friday, we could have been in the final game. He said, I'm flying over. I said, oh, okay. It's all right. Anyway, so the next game we play Australia, and we got taught a lesson. Lost 16
They were
to
at
3.
their peak back in those.
They definitely were.
They were. They had great players. They broke down the zone, and as Julie will explain, could shoot.
Yeah,
They had great accuracy.
yes, and they shot like it was coming out of a cannon. They were deadly shots.
Julie, something we were talking about earlier, you mentioned how the Great Britain type teams all shot high.
Yeah.
Like England, Wales, and Scotland.
Yeah,
Was that-
all their shots were always high. They never shot low. The Americans were more finesse and had more of the fancy kind of shots.
Yeah.
They weren't necessarily hard, but they were
Well
accurate.
placed, well
Well
placed,
placed.
yeah.
And then the Australians, they were like bullets coming at you, and coming from the top of the fan. You know, they weren't close. They were just boom.
Really,
Yeah.
Was that frightening?
Yeah, they were.
They could really hunt the ball.
And I don't remember, was there a day off before the England game, or was it right after the England
No,
game?
played every
I
day.
think we
No,
played
we
every
had one
day.
day off.
Played every.
We had one day off mid, I'll tell you why, because
Oh,
Okay.
the coaches took us out to the movies. We had a day off, and Rocky 3 was
there you go.
playing in London like that in that fall. I think it'd come out over here in the summer.
So it must have been like a Friday off.
Yeah, there was a day. There was one day off,
Oh,
and
okay.
so they decided. We didn't decide. They decided. We got on the city bus and we went to wherever the
Was that
theater
in London
was.
or Nottingham?
No.
No,
was
we
in
were in
Nottingham,
Nottingham,
yeah.
wherever it was in the theater. And this was like again, to me, a gelling moment, a real gelling moment, because you know there was even though we played together on the field, we weren't hanging out together off the field yet. Because there was the West and the East, or the East was really scattered, but the West was quite a unit. We all went to that movie together, and the song was The Eye of the Tiger. I remember this because we were singing it all the way home, and we're doing the Rocky thing, and I guess we just won that England game, or wherever was
You're
going
feeling
on.
great.
Maybe it was the day off before we went into the bronze medal game. I'm not sure. We were right in the zone then. We could do it. We believed in ourselves because we were kind of like, you know, no expectations.
Exactly, yeah.
And now we're winning games, and now we get all pumped up watching this Rocky movie, and we're all together. All of us, the whole team, East, West, who cares? Didn't matter anymore. We're sitting together on the bus, singing together.
You've reached where you need to be.
Yeah, I think that to me as a player,
Yeah.
and Pat, they got all the stats of the games and stuff. As a player, to me, that was huge. It was like a real socializing, fun. We got this. We actually started to believe in ourselves. I think after
So it's
that.
like popcorn, the magic elixir, or what?
I don't know, but it was that song too, for sure.
Oh,
Eye of the Tiger.
okay.
We sang it the rest of the tournament, for sure. Yeah.
Great memory. of that
Yeah,
one.
yeah. it
Great
was-
memory.
Yeah.
So you played the U.S. at some point, and
Right.
did they take it to you, or was
no. So we lost Australia 16-3. On the heels of that, we had to play the U.S.
Yeah.
So that was a critical game because the U.S. had lost to Australia.
Yeah.
So if by some miracle, we had beaten the U.S.,
been in the gold
we would have been in the gold medal on tiebreaker.
Yeah.
My memory, and Courtney will talk about, I do remember the coaching meeting. Courtney, being mostly Canadian, but a lot of American, said, we don't want a game like yesterday against the U.S., right?
Yeah.
So we lost 16-3. We got to play the U.S. They're a super strong team. Sandy, Hoodie, and Net, they had all kinds of stars. And I remember Courtney looking at Dave and I and saying, we got to play a really good game here today. I got to go back home. So we did play a good game. We, conditions were in our favor. It was kind of rainy and muddy. It slowed them down a bit. And we lost 9-3, but we were fair game.
Played well.
You know what? I always say if we could have gotten Carrie the ball a few more times, who knows? She was lights out down there. They couldn't. What was unique about Carrie was because she played box, boys field, and women's field, she would roll the cage like a men's field player, with the stick tight to her head, and rarely missed. So they had tremendous difficulty
To defend.
to defend her.
Yeah.
They hadn't seen a player like that yet.
Yeah.
And so, but either way, we came out of there, and Courtney was happy because she must have bought us a beer that night. Because now we were rolling into the bronze medal
Yeah,
game,
which wasn't
a
expected.
rematch with Scotland.
I do remember on the bus back to the dorms, we were sharing the bus with the Americans. And you thought we had won. We were all celebrating because 9-3, that's the closest we've ever got. Usually it's like 20 to 30 to,
When we played the Americans.
So yeah, and you think we had won the game.
It's
No.
moral victories.
Yeah, the Americans were looking at us going, what are they celebrating for? They lost.
But that's the game, though. If you've played very well, you should celebrate playing very well, no matter what the outcome.
Absolutely.
That's because
Right.
you can't determine winning and losing. You can only go out there and play the best you can. If you do that, you've accomplished what you're trying to do. So.
And improvement.
So then you see a movie, and then you are going to come up with the bronze game. Was that being played the same day as the gold medal game?
Yes.
Prior
So
to
it was
it.
all on the same day.
Right.
And was your game first
Yes.
that day? Okay. And what was it like, in the locker room, the morning of breakfast? What was it like getting ready to play that game? Was it nerves, or was it you just glad to be here and whatever? What was the feeling then for everybody?
Well, let's talk to the players.
Yeah, the players should be the
Well,
ones.
I know during the whole tournament, I would sleep in my equipment. I would go to breakfast in my equipment.
That's why you're a great goalie.
Because I had to become one with my equipment.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
So I used to do that. The bronze game, I don't recall.
I think we were nervous. See, because when we went to the stadium, they had bussed in schoolgirls.
Oh,
Like
yes.
thousands of schoolgirls.
Oh, so that's
There was
pretty
like
cool.
real fans screaming and yelling.
Yeah.
And we're like walking out there going, what is this? Like we'd watched sort of US football on TV, and with all those crazy fans and, just university players. And there were we walking out, and they were outdoor stadium, but it had like the sort of roof thing over it, and you could just look up in the stands, and it was unbelievable.
Yeah, it was a
Cheering,
cricket
screaming.
pitch.
Yeah, it was a cricket pitch. That's right, it was. Yeah.
Right.
So that kind of threw us when we get out there to have.
but
We
this-
had fans, but not that many.
Yeah, but this time though, you had earned the respect of everybody involved to get to that game, right?
Right.
And we'd done the black that day for sure in the
Yeah.
eyes. I remember that.
Yeah.
But I think, too, from a coaching perspective, we knew we had lost to Scotland 10-3 about 3 days before.
Right.
So we knew, and they continued to play well through the tournament, right? It wasn't like their play deteriorated. They were a good squad,
Right.
really good squad. And as Marie said, they had, some good finishers. So, we had to sort of put our heads together and say, well, we know what's working. My memory is that we learned from the first time, because I said with Dave's support and Courtney's support, we need to drop right away. We'll give them the midfield. They get it. We know we don't want them going odd to net. So drop.
'Cause that was their strength. Yeah.
Right. And then we knew they had one player who had scored almost half their goals. So we said, we're going to eliminate the player. So we said Marie, who had done this her whole career in box lacrosse.
And earlier we talked about, you had done that before earlier, and that was
Right.
a seed of the.
So we just
yeah.
said, you
Mark.
stay with her
Marker.
and let's see. And so
don't even
maybe
think I touched the
Marie
ball.
can pick up her end of the story on that, because I think it's interesting to see how the player involved reacted to that level of coverage, which I'm sure they'd never seen before.
And the word we would use was mark.
Yeah.
Ball side, mark, mark. And then you should probably fill in.
So that was
there.
my assignment. I didn't, you
Isn't
know,
that easy though? Like once you're given that, like
Well, it
it's
is.
like
It
I
is.
know what I'm doing.
I do, because when Paul and Stan coached me in box, I was actually that person. I was a defender in box as well.
Yeah.
And they would just, in a big game, they would just say, you don't go anywhere but right beside that person, and you're on them and they don't get the ball. Your job is to put your stick up first and knock it away. Even if I didn't catch it and pass it, that wasn't my goal. My goal was to make sure it didn't go in her stick. So that was my job. I just stood right beside her. Her name was Fiona. She had this black curly hair. She was very lovely, like ladylike. It was surprising. But then the game started and she was a fierce, fierce competitor. And I remember about halfway through the game, I don't think she figured it out. And I didn't have to, the other defenders, they had to adjust. Like whatever zone they were playing, I was oblivious. Like they were just told, Marie's just there, she's out of it, so you guys have to readjust to other players. And I went wherever she went, up the field, down the field, and she was a runner, so I had
So
to
you
run with her.
you earned your
Took her out of the picture.
But about halfway through the game, I remember distinctly, she said, the ball was down the other end of the field, and I was still right there. And she just looked at me, and it's the only time she even got a little bit miffed, and she goes, I don't have the ball. You're not allowed to do that. And I just looked at her and I said, yes, I am. That was my job. And so she didn't score any goals, I think. She scored 0 goals.
Wow.
And we ultimately, I'm sure they'll tell you how ultimately we won the game. But I do remember afterwards, she was lovely. Like we shook hands. I've got a picture of the two of us together on the field. Like, you know, sometimes.
She was a real sportswoman.
Yeah, real sportswoman. Yeah. It was, but it wasn't a hard job because it's the job I'd played all my life. They had to adjust around that I wasn't where I was supposed to be in the zone.
So how did the game unfold? Did they score first?
Boy.
No. My recollection of the game, honestly, was that we came out fired like on all cylinders. Things were clicking.
Yeah.
And we moved ahead quite a bit. So by halftime, I think we were up about 6-1.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And they were tacking to try and get back into the game. Ultimately, the game ended up 9-4, which is quite a switch from a 10-3 loss.
what a reverse.
But my recollection clear was that the few times that in the second half that they started to mount the charge, I remember the fans would start to cheer as they moved the ball up the field. All of these young
Kids,
girls who were, favoring the home team, for instance. They were the home team, really. You could hear this roar building as they would move the ball up the field. But yeah, we the players
And
did an amazing job.
They were also the only Great Britain team that made it into the final match.
Right. So they were the team to cheer for.
They were
Yes.
the team to cheer for,
Right.
right?
It was
Yeah.
U.S. and Australia in the
Australia.
top game, and us and them. So
Right.
that's the only people they really
Exactly.
home team they
That's
had to cheer
right.
for.
That's true.
So Julie, was that one of your better games?
I don't remember the game.
Was it one of her better games?
I think, you know what, honestly, they didn't have as many chances. Julie always played well,
Yeah.
always. But
She
she didn't
started
have,
every game and played.
yes, she played every game, all game. And that's a good thing to mention, that a lot of people don't realize at that era, the players were basically had to play the entire game. So in other words, you had your 12 on the field. They played all 60 minutes.
Unless there was an injury or something.
And if you got taken out, you were not allowed back in.
Right.
I
Right.
feel like soccer is.
Exactly. And the only time we could substitute was at halftime. You were allowed to substitute 2 players for the entire game.
Just at the halftime break.
Right.
And they had to report to the official table.
Did you
And-
guys do that?
We didn't do
I
much
don't think we did. the
because
final
we were
game.
worried about injury. Because if you substituted a 2 at half and somebody went down in the second half, you had to play short.
Right.
So we didn't do much substitution. We did substitute on injury. On one time, we didn't
Took a
do
ball
much
in the eye,
substitution
yeah.
at all.
So what
Mostly
if,
because we
God
were
forbid,
nervous.
Julie got hurt? Who was behind Julie?
We did have an extra goalkeeper
You did,
from
okay.
British Columbia, Debbie Smith, called Smitty,
Okay.
who was a beautiful box player. Julie had a rhythm, and Julie just kept proving herself and proving herself. And as we've talked about prior to this, she was the first line of attack, and she would start that ball, and Marie, and off we'd go. And it was just it was something to behold.
And by that team, the team had come to rely and expect Julie to be there, right? It's like, you know, it's a backbone for a
Right.
team to have
Yeah.
a goalie like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you win the game. There's a lot of disappointed Great Britons over there.
The school kids came down from the stands and were asking for our autographs. It was crazy. Like, we were like, what? You know, they were cheering for them, but now they wanted to come and get our autographs. It was hilarious.
Right.
Rock
You
stars.
guys must have, you know, to win a medal out of 6 teams, first time out, and
But there wasn't a medal.
It's referred
Right.
referred to as the bronze medal, and it was because of the leadership of Jane Clayton and many other people that they found the medal, and I brought my medal with me, but they found the medal and were able to create the bronze for the Canadian team.
Because they only were giving out gold and
Back
silver.
in the day, it was just first
Which
and
is a little
second.
strange. It wasn't
But
like
we
the
had
Olymp-
expected it. We, you know, because we came from this culture
Where
and,
it's
you
medals.
know, gold, silver, bronze. So we're lining up. There's the anthem. We're super proud. We're maybe crying a little bit, waiting for them to come along. I think they came along and shook our hands or something, and we were kind of
Everybody's
like,
going, where's the,
Where's the medal?
where's the stuff?
I mean, it's not in the Olympic Games, so, and I don't know the reason. It'd be probably historically a good research as to why it was only the first game, only first and second, gold and silver. I don't know the answer to that, but it might be fun to know. But a great group of people worked on it and got everyone their medal.
Yeah, that hung over for many years, right? And then
Yeah.
finally that was
I
rectified.
think we have it here.
Yeah.
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 right.
40
Why
40
don't you
years.
hold that up?
40
Hold
years.
it
We
up.
just got them.
Yeah.
I think the players should hold it up.
Yeah. So it was 40 years later
The players should
that
hold it.
that all those people got
40 years
together.
later.
Yeah, and it was really interestingly somebody who's involved with World Lacrosse in their awards group, Stephen Taylor, who noticed and said all of these, even the men's team in those era, and you played, you know, and in fact, you know, you were playing for bronze medals in '82 with Team Canada, so you knew there was a medal, and he went down the list and said, "Did you guys ever get a medal?" And I said, no, not at the tournament. And so the wheels got moving, and a lot of people got involved, and poof, we got a medal.
Probably made it really sweet to receive that.
It was great. It was a fantastic reunion
Yeah.
to see all of these people together after so many years, even though we'd seen each other over the years sporadically. And I know the group in the West had a good gathering. We had a good event here as part of the 25th of the museum here, and we had a great turnout. All of the players in the East who are alive came. We've sadly, you know, we lost Jenny Kyle recently and Noreen Lem in the 90s. Courtney wasn't able to make it. She sent a wonderful speech, but we had our group together. Dave got his group together, and Apparently the only person who's yet to get her medal is Janice Malcolm, who's in Prince Edward Island,
She's in
PEI, but she's going to be getting it soon.
And there's one really cool thing to me. It's lovely to have the medal. It's lovely to have this experience. But what I think we all realize is that the sport itself is just so in our hearts. And now I'm going to tear up. You know, my dad taught me to play. I hate when this happens, but I really think it wasn't the medal. It's the fact that the love of the game is so strong. Yeah. Even to this day, I haven't, you know, played for years, but I still love the game.
Yeah, it's a true emotion with it, you know.
And there's so many, certainly within Canada, great lacrosse families. Like if your grandpa or your dad or your grandpa, you know, started it, it goes down through the line, and obviously so the same with us. And our children all played, and our nieces all played, and it does become. I was saying in the spring when we got the medals, it almost means more to me getting it now than back then, because when I got it, my brothers and sisters were there. Of course, my mom is gone, but my nieces were there, and they're players. And Paul's granddaughter was there, and she's like our next lacrosse player.
That's great. Yeah, that's great.
We're working on it anyways.
That's great.
So when something happens like this, and I know it personally from being with the men's team in '78, things happen when something out of the ordinary happens, and it creates growth for the game, you know? And for instance, Canada had its first scholarship woman come out of that situation, the young 15/16-year-old Gail Cummings Danson was the first woman to go down on a full scholarship down in the U.S., you know, and that was the beginning.
Tina Sloan Green was her coach, and I played with Tina and way back and coached at Temple. And just a fantastic experience. And now to see, of course, Gail. Yeah, there's so many kids who have had the chance to further their academic excellence by playing a sport that they love.
One of the things that stood out for me at the medal presentation earlier this spring was one of the OLA representatives. She had been a team player herself. Her name escapes me. Give the speech. Tammy, yes.
Tammy Rayner.
She was up there, gave a lovely speech. One of the things she said was, every team after '82, because we'd gotten the bronze, no one had done it yet. That was always their mantra. We got to match '82. And you know what? Sitting back 40 years later, I'm like, oh wow, I guess it made an impact. But more than that, if you actually look at the women who are on that '82 team, how many of us went on to grow the sport? Field, box, out west, down east, Janice Malcolm down in PEI, you know, still building the game down there. I went back to box. I did, actually, that's not true. I coached field at the university level, but I went back to box, you know, and as our family moved around and they didn't have a women's program, I would start a women's program. But Michelle, I keep calling her Muff, Michelle out west, you know, she's now the head of the regrowth of the women's box nationally. Like, so many of us came back.
Julie did a lot
of course,
Julie was coaching.
Boys, you know,
Bar Boys was
over the top.
over the top.
Devoted her life to it.
and
But
she's-
it was like what our coaches started, what we benefited from. So many of us gave back, and that's really what's growing the game.
That's right, because you shared in a special moment, and you're actually sharing that with others, you know,
for sure.
so that's part of it. But well, I think we'll bring this to a bit of a close, but you each get a minute for final words. We'll go left to right. Okay.
I think for me it's gratitude. And you got emotional now, I'm good too.
I can't stand when I get emotional.
Yes, my dad was a lacrosse player, but he passed away before he watched me play my first game. And my brother stepped in and coached us, our box team, a lot of success. And then when we all went over age, then they went and learned the field game, so that I'm the beneficiary of all the work that Paul did. And the country is too, of course. But for me, it's gratitude. I made great friends. I'm still friends with Michelle Boyer today, and other other box lacrosse players, and it's it brought a lot to my life, and I gave back where I could, but I think I got more than I've given, so it was great.
All right, Paul?
Yeah, it was an incredible experience. I've used the term many times. My staff will know timing's everything. Things came together, and we met the right people at the right time. Courtney, Jenny Kyle, my mother did incredible work. We picked up great players. Stan, my brother, was as good a player hunter as me, and we hunted down Julie Norton early in her box career. She was an incredible box player. So we were able to get the right group together, and to see it all happen the way it played out was amazing. And it's great to be friends with people 40 years later and see that the proudest thing for me is that the fact that each and every one of the players from our East group gave back incredibly to the game.
Self-build it.
Yeah.
All right, Courtney, you come in, get dropped in as an American, but you just love the game, and you're pleased to be with a group of people you felt very comfortable with?
Absolutely. And as I hear others speak, one of the things that's the tie to me is family. I mentioned earlier in this taping that my study break as a child was going out in the street, playing catch with my dad. And my dad's 100 years old and 8 months. He sent his lacrosse ties to all of you guys, and I hope they're silk, they're beautiful. I hope you wear a coat and tie again sometime soon, and remember Don Solenberger. But as I watched that grow, and my choice all through high school, all through college, was I met some amazing women and guys as well. But I really loved the game, and the passion I had for the game. Of course I'm going to try to help people learn it. Of course we're going to come to Colgate University. Of course you'll come down to Lafayette College. Of course, even though I'm working in the business world, I do the best I can. And when HBO gave me the permission to continue my commitment, I was so grateful. And I love the game. And then in 1986, when Swarthmore College, my friend Pete Hess, who's no longer with us, was the site coordinator because she coached at Swarthmore College, and I grew up in Swarthmore, Wallingford, Pennsylvania. Paul stayed at my parents' house while I was still working at HBO. We did a demonstration game at the Phillies. We had cable television operators doing public service announcements, PSIs, on their cable channel to promote young women playing lacrosse, and it just was so much fun. And I hope that anyone who touches the game of lacrosse recognizes great people playing a great sport, and it's all out all the time.
Well, I just want to be thankful for Paul and Stan, and when I left Rexdale because I folded and I moved to Westmall and /Etobicoke, that they gave me the opportunity. I remember the first time I went there, it was up in Lakefield, I think, and everybody was in a room and they're all meditating, and I walked in going, what the hell are they doing? You know, they were imagery. But also thankful for Paul in the 81. I went to him and said, I'm not going to make the Canadian team as a cover point. I want to play net. Because I had to play one game in one of the tournaments down there because our goalie at the time, decided she wasn't going to play. And I knew that was the only way I was going to make the Canadian team. And I think he sort of hesitated at first, but then he allowed me to become goalkeeper.
Wow.
So.
And that was the
Good
right
decision.
move.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I usually make one good decision a month. That one was one that lasted a lifetime.
That's what keeps you viable.